So let's talk a little about the power of social media, and then I'm going to dive right into what each of the 6 steps are. So, one of the core powers of social media is that you can form a one on one relationship with thousands of people at once. If you're not so familiar with social media, you might be familiar with email marketing, which is kind of a similar mode of communication where I'm able to write one email that feels like a one on one communication, but I can send it out to 50,000 people at the same time. Social media is the same way, except it's even stronger in forming a relationship, a true relationship with your audience and with your prospects. So, a lot of people will say, oh, social media is a huge waste of time. And social media can be a waste of time, don't get me wrong, if you use it in the wrong way. But I actually see it as a huge time saver because I can sign on Twitter and I can talk to 3,000 people at once. And I can make every one of those 3,000 people feel like I'm having a conversation with them. And of course, it makes it really easy to facilitate actual one on one conversations with the people who follow me on Twitter through direct messages and at replies and things like that. So, as far as I'm concerned, I can't think of a faster way to talk to thousands of people and a faster way to relationship build with thousands of people than social media. I mean, I think it's a little bit bunk when people say it's a time waster if that's how you want to use it, to waste time, but I don't want to use it to waste time. I want to use it to save time. That's how I see it. So, the next powerful element of social media is building a community and creating connections between your followers. This is something that's really often overlooked, and I don't see a lot of social media experts, social media people talking about. If you've read the book Tribes by Seth Godin, which I highly recommend, and really all the stuff he talks about in that book is the same sort of core concepts that I'm going to be talking about today. In Tribes, Seth Godin says that you've really formed a true, lasting community when it's not just a relationship between you and the person, but it's relationships forming between the people in your community. And that used to be really difficult to do because it used to be that the only way you could do that was to have some sort of in-person event, especially if you have a national business where your audience and your community are all over the place. It used to be that you had to have events that people had to fly out to, and of course you had to come up with some great incentive to make them actually come. But now that's really easy to do. I saw an example of this just with I taught a Twitter webinar. You can find that at twitterwebinar.com. It's a class now that's prepackaged, but it was a live seminar that I taught. And it's a side effect that I noticed happened. It's actually not even something that I consciously facilitated. But when the webinar was over, one of the people in the class said, "Hey, I want to connect with all the other people that are in the class. I want to know them and I want to talk to them because if they had the same interest in this webinar, we would probably have similar interests and get along. We're all entrepreneurs. We're all people who are interested in furthering our business using Twitter and using social media." And so I sent out that list, and I see those people talking to each other on Twitter all the time. They're people who are in my community, but now they've made their own community where they don't need to just talk to me. They can talk to each other. But even when they're talking to each other, it's somehow furthering my brand power because I'm the one who brought them together and I'm what they initially had in common, if that makes sense. And they started doing that even before this woman suggested that happen. I saw people just doing it on their own, kind of figuring. It was funny because I could see the conversations on Twitter where people would be like, "Are you in Laura's webinar? I kind of figured that you might be, from that tweet I saw you send her the other day." And then they said hi to each other and they introduced, and it was so cool. And that happened just as a side effect, without me even consciously trying. So if you start consciously trying to do that, as you can imagine, you'll see it happen really well and really quickly. So the next thing I want to talk about is how social media shows people the real side of you instead of a boring business bio. It's my opinion that the era of pretending that we have no life outside of our business, pretending that we just go into work and that's all we think about and talk about for our whole lives, I think that's over. I personally want it to be over. I run my business as though it's over, and it's something that I'm seeing more and more where people want to know about your whole life, which makes sense because that's always the connections that we've made with people. I mean, the cliche is kind of the idea of the sales guy who has those, notes on the back of his Rolodex. Like, if anyone watched The Office recently, they just had that on The Office where Michael Scott had his Rolodex where he had, like, he has a gay son written on the back of the card. That's kind of the salesman cliche, where little tidbits about people's personal lives, and you say, how's your wife? How's your kids? So people have always connected that way, but it was always like this thing that you had to be very careful with. You wanted to reveal a little bit about your life, but not too much. Now with social media, you can let people know you as a real person, and that attracts people much more powerfully to you than just knowing you as a business person and then happening to know that you're married, but they don't know anything about that. In social media, we get to see pictures of the trips people take with their families, and that's the kind of stuff that really increases that know, like, and trust factor, that really makes people feel like they are in your world and they're a part of your world and they want to get to know you better. The last really important thing about social media, kind of on a different slant now, is that it's easily and instantly trackable. So when you compare it to traditional PR, where you're showing up on a TV show or you're showing up in a magazine, you usually have no idea if that really does anything, because it's sort of that vague brand awareness thing where someone could have seen you in a magazine and then they could have Googled your name, but you never know if those two things are connected. Most of the time, you have no idea if that kind of press has any effect on you or not, and you certainly, even if you notice maybe an increase in traffic on your website, you aren't able to directly track it to your sales. Where what's really cool about social media is that you can go nuts tracking absolutely everything. I don't do this because I probably should, but I'm just not a huge tracking person. It's not very fun for me. But if you are a big tracking person, which you should be because it's really valuable for your business, I mean, you can track how many dollars every single tweet with a link to your website brings in. That's easy. It's very easy to do. And that makes social media, this argument, I think that this idea that some people have that social media is kind of all fluff and it's all fun. I mean, it's really easy to disprove that. You just start tracking and you're either seeing the traffic come in and you're seeing the money come in and you're seeing the opportunities come in, or you're not. So if you think that social media is fluff, try it out and track it and see, because I don't think it's fluff at all. It's worked pretty well for me.